Welcome, everybody, to the Sentinel Report. I'm your host, Alex Newman. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We've got so much for you today, including three very special guests, a former member of the Trump transition team, one of the top independent educational researchers in the country, and a family farmer who's sounding the alarm about what is happening to our farmers in this country and around the world, including as it relates to the Chi-Com. So you want to stay tuned for all that. Also, lots of news, what's going on with the Trump administration, what's going on in international affairs, and so much more. First, just like we do every day, we've got a word from the Word. This comes out of John chapter 15, verses 1 through 6. The Bible reads, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me, and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing." So that's a pretty clear and easy test for each of us right there, ladies and gentlemen. Jesus tells us that if we are in him, then we will bear fruit. Very simple. Are we bearing fruit? What does it mean to bear fruit, right? Well, it means we are loving our neighbors. It means we are preaching the gospel. It means we are expanding the kingdom. It means we are serving the poor. It means that we are making disciples, as we were commanded to do in the Great Commission. So if we're doing those things, that's a good sign. If we're not doing those things, that is a very troubling sign that calls for some self-reflection. So folks, please, just critical message right there from Jesus. Let's take it to heart. Now, we've got a lot going on in the news today, too. But before we do that, I want to let you know the Sentinel Report is really expanding rapidly, the number of platforms that are carrying us. We are now live on a whole bunch of different platforms. In addition to the usual, we've got Lindell TV, Rumble, YouTube. And of course, we're putting all this on X. We're also on Taken and Worldview Tube and AM/FM radio. So regardless of where you're hearing us, listening to us, watching us, doesn't matter. We are thankful for you, and we hope you will go check us out at the website, libertysentinel.org. You can find all our back episodes there. And, of course, keep tuning in wherever you are. We're also on some cable operators and broadcasters out in the Midwest, and we will have more for you on that in the weeks ahead. Now, going to the news, folks, there's a lot happening in the world right now. And I want to start with something that's critical, right? Jesus tells us, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Well, it looks like Donald Trump is trying to be a peacemaker. He is actually in the process of organizing a peace summit in Saudi Arabia. He's working with Vladimir Putin on bringing about peace in Ukraine. Now, according to Trump, he says Putin wants to stop fighting. He shot down the idea that Putin was hoping to actually take over bigger and better targets throughout Europe. Here's exactly what Donald Trump says. He says, "I think he wants to stop fighting. I see that. We spoke long and hard. Steve Witkoff, that's the Middle East envoy, was with him for a very extended period, like about 3 hours. I think he wants to stop fighting." That's what Trump had to say to reporters over the weekend when he was asked what Putin is really asking for. He says they have a big, powerful machine. You understand that. And they defeated Hitler and they defeated Napoleon. You know, they've been fighting a long time. They've done it before. But I think he would like to stop fighting. Now, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, he went on NBC News, or NBC Fake News, as I call it, Meet the Press, and he told host Kristen Welker that the last time he had talked to Trump, he had told Trump not to trust Putin. And I echo those concerns. I don't think Putin is a trustworthy guy, former KGB, not a good guy. Zelensky said, "Don't trust him when he says he wants peace." And Zelensky also told Trump, he told NBC Fake News, that Putin is a liar, but that he's a little bit scared of Trump. So that's probably good. Zelensky went on to say, "I think the president has this chance and he's strong. And I think that this can really push Putin to peace negotiations. I think he can." But he says, don't trust Putin. Don't just trust words about a ceasefire. Now, Zelensky did say that he thinks Putin is going to eventually wage war against NATO. He says they have intelligence. We have not seen this intelligence. Says they have documents saying that Putin is preparing to invade. Now, he says they got a big number of soldiers in Belarus, and he says he's worried that Putin will target Poland and maybe Lithuania next. Well, we don't know whether that's true or not. Certainly wouldn't put it past Mr. Putin. We do know that the Europeans are very, very, very upset that Donald Trump seems to have cut them out of this process. The Europeans are arguing that the U.S. government is shutting them out. And so they're actually having an emergency meeting today in Paris, hosted by French globalist President Emmanuel Macron. They've got the leaders of Britain, Italy, Poland, Spain, the Netherlands, Denmark, the European Commission, quote unquote, President Ursula von der Leyen, even NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. And in an op-ed for the British newspaper, the Daily Telegraph, the far-left UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that he is ready to send troops to Ukraine to guarantee a peace deal. So this is significant, folks. This represents quite an escalation in what we have seen. But again, we're talking about expanding the war when it comes to the Europeans. We'll see what comes out of this summit in Saudi Arabia. Definitely something to watch. It would be quite a feather in Trump's cap if he could bring about peace after all these years of war with just some peace negotiations. Now, turning to what's been going on in Europe, another jihadist, yes, another one, just used a car as a weapon to kill innocent people. He drove his car into a demonstration in Munich, and so far has killed a 2-year-old girl and her mother. They were killed in this car ramming terrorist attack on the demonstration in Munich. The perpetrator, or alleged perpetrator, a 24-year-old quote unquote refugee from Afghanistan, a surprise. Arrested right after the attack last week. Prosecutors claim he has an Islamic extremist motive. No, you think? Really? Wow. But no evidence that he was involved in a radical terrorist network, according to German authorities. Yeah, 39 people injured, some of them quite seriously in this attack. And we've got, again, children among the injured and among the dead. And the attack actually happened right before J.D. Vance's historic speech at the Munich Security Conference, calling the Euro tyrants to their faces, right? Vance actually warned that Europe's greatest threat is not Russia or China. The real concern, he said, is the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values. Now, I don't like to downplay the threat that the Russians and the Chinese pose to anyone who doesn't agree with global tyranny. But I think in this case, Vance is probably right. Even more of a threat than hostile foreign powers that want to destroy you are treasonous leaders that want to destroy everything you stand for, right? Who cares if the Chi-Coms take you over if you don't have any freedom left? So Vance was criticizing the European Union, the European Commissioner, for saying that Germany could just annul its upcoming election. This is exactly what they did in Romania, right? The Romanian candidate that was way ahead. They didn't like him. They said, oh, Russia. Suddenly we cancel the election. Folks, this is crazy. And Vance actually did a good job calling him out on this. He said if a few $100,000 in advertising on social media can rig your election, then you've got bigger problems than a few $100,000 on social media ads. If you look at one of the most pressing challenges in Europe, according to Vance, that is the mass migration. According to him, 1 out of 5 people living in Germany is a migrant. He did warn about shutting down the media, shutting down elections, and he had some interesting stuff to say. I want to quote this one. Drove him totally crazy making fun of Greta Thunberg. He says, even when people express views outside your own country, and even when those people are very influential, and trust me, I say this with all humor, if American democracy can survive 10 years of Greta Thunberg scolding, you guys can survive a few months of Elon Musk, right? He says, but when no democracy, American, German, or European, will survive, is telling millions of voters that their thoughts and concerns, their aspirations, their pleas for relief are invalid or unworthy of even being considered. He said democracy rests on the sacred principle that the voice of the people matters. And of course, America is not a democracy. And our founding fathers very deliberately did not want a democracy. They wanted a constitutional republic. But if you replace the word democracy with freedom, if you replace the word democracy with self-government, in that case, those things may make sense. And kudos to J.D. Vance for highlighting these really important issues right to the faces of the Europeans. Now, Trump just signed some executive orders cutting all federal funding to schools that mandate the so-called COVID vaccine. It is, of course, not a vaccine, but in the order, he says that some school districts and universities continue to coerce children and young adults into taking the COVID-19 vaccine by conditioning their education on it, and others may re-implement such mandates. And so with this executive order, Trump is stopping federal funding for all of this madness. Very, very good idea. He says these mandates usurp parental authority and burden students of many faiths. It is the policy of my administration that discretionary federal funds should not be used to directly or indirectly support or subsidize any of this kind of stuff. Kudos again to President Trump. Thank you for that. Now, turning to North America, you've got the president of Mexico, President Claudia Sheinbaum, saying if Trump declares the cartels to be terrorist organizations, then the Mexican government's going to be really mad. And they're going to escalate and expand their lawsuit against American weapons manufacturers, calling them accomplices in the crime wave that they're seeing in Mexico. That sounds to me like these organizations now have the backing of the Mexican state. You can listen to this lady yourself.
México tiene una demanda internacional contra fabricantes de armas y distribuidores de armas en Estados Unidos. Si llegaran a decretar a grupos de la delincuencia organizada como terroristas, pues tendríamos que ampliar la demanda en Estados Unidos, porque entonces, como ya reconoció el propio Departamento de Justicia de Estados Unidos, que el 74% de las armas de los grupos delictivos vienen de Estados Unidos, pues entonces, ¿cómo quedan las armadoras y las distribuidoras frente al decreto? Tal vez, no sé, los abogados lo están viendo, pero pueden ser cómplices. Lo que nosotros no vamos a aceptar nunca, pues, es la intromisión, el injerencismo, y siempre vamos a defender nuestra soberanía.
Trump really goes after the cartels, then we're going to be really mad and we're going to go after your gun makers. Now, if you remember Operation Fast and Furious, the the Obama administration actually got caught sending high-powered American weapons to Mexican drug cartels. Yeah, they got caught. And then they said, oh, we were doing an investigation. All right. Turns out the guy they were investigating was already on the FBI's payroll. They weren't investigating anything. If you also remember, they were using these American guns showing up at Mexican crime scenes and say, look, your Second Amendment. That's why Mexicans are killing each other. Look, as somebody who grew up in Mexico, I spent more time living in Mexico than any other place. I can tell you, American Second Amendment rights are not what's causing the problem in Mexico. Okay. Obviously, Mexicans have very strong anti-gun laws, right? They have anti-murder laws. So somehow, those laws are not actually stopping the murder. They're not actually stopping the weapons. So what's going on here? Well, I suspect that corruption has a lot to do with it. We know that the U.S. government has actually partnered with some of these cartels. I'm hoping that the Trump administration will take all that apart and expose it all. But folks, this has nothing to do with the gun rights of Americans. This has everything to do with really troubling corruption in government in Mexico and even in the United States. Speaking of corruption in government, we've got over $100 million in U.S. foreign aid sent to organizations directly linked to designated terrorist organizations. That's according to a new report by the Middle East Forum. They found in their investigation that the U.S. aid, these foreign aid programs, distributed more than $100 million to these terrorist-related organizations since 2007. $152 million came through, yes, you guessed it, USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development. The U.S. State Department also sent a bunch, $11.6 million. And, of course, the left is squealing about the audits, about what's going on with DOGE. They're really upset that all this is being exposed. What they really should be upset about is sending American taxpayer money to actual terrorist organizations. One of the organizations that they highlight in this report is called the American Near East Refugee Aid. They got $102 million in grants from USAID, $7 million in grants from the State Department, and most recently, they just got $12.5 million from USAID in 2024. And yet this organization, according to the Middle East Forum, is very closely tied to a bunch of organizations that are working with Hamas. And Democrats have talked about this. The U.S. Aid Inspector General has talked about some of these failings. And here's some of the things that they found. Sub-awardees were not always vetted. Oh, you think? Right? Anti-terrorism certifications were not always obtained. Oh, you think? Required clauses were not always included in awards and sub-awards. So some of these USAID beneficiaries have called for the land to be cleansed from the impurity of the Jews. And we're just getting started here, but this is just absolutely insane. This is what your tax dollars are paying for and have been paying for, at least until Donald Trump came in and tried putting a stop to all of this stuff. Folks, it's out of control. Absolutely out of control. Now, we've got a bunch of federal judges that want all this to continue. And we here have said for years that it's time for the Congress to start impeaching some of these activists in black robes. Well, it looks like that message is finally being heard. We've got House Republicans now drafting articles of impeachment against some of the judges that are blocking key Trump policies. Congressman Eli Crane of Arizona is targeting Judge Paul Engelmayer for halting DOGE's Treasury access. Representative Andrew Clyde of Georgia taking aim at Judge John McConnell Jr. for stopping some of these federal funding freezes. And Elon Musk, of course, is now calling for a wave of judicial impeachments to stop these crazy activist judges from stopping much needed reforms. We certainly hope that we will see more of that. Folks, we're going to go to break in a minute and come back with a very special guest, independent education researcher, Kelly Schenkoske. She's an excellent researcher. She's going to tell us about the whole school, whole community, whole child scheme. I call it parental replacement centers. But before we do, I want to encourage you to get over to refiningrhetoric.com, refiningrhetoric.com. Our friend Robert Bortons, the CEO of Classical Conversations, is doing phenomenal work over there, bringing you excellent interviews with some of the most important voices in our country today on culture, politics, education, you name it. So get over to refiningrhetoric.com, refiningrhetoric.com. And while you're at it, check out Classical Conversations. I've got my own kids enrolled there. I'm a senior fellow there. It's a wonderful, wonderful program for homeschoolers. You can join forces with others in your community. Stay tuned. We're going to be right back with our first guest here on the Sentinel Report in just a moment.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our first ever mega sale on overstock clearance and brand new products. For example, save over 50% on this season's flannel sheets. Queen size only $59.98. Kings only $69.98. They sell out fast every year, so order now. Save 20% on our brand new My Crosses. They're designed in the likeness of the one I've worn every day for over 20 years. They come in men's and women's, and they're made right here in the USA. Get our 2025 six-piece My Towel sets for only $29.98. Our initial quantities are extremely low, so get them now before they go. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, just $14.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our first ever mega sale. But wait, remember that $75 free shipping rule? Well, that ship is sailed because right now, every order ships absolutely free.
Welcome back to the Sentinel Report. Alex Newman, your host here. Thanks so much for staying with us over the break, folks. And if you know what's going on in the schools, it's worse than you think. It could always be worse, and in this case, it really, really is. Now, obviously, Donald Trump has been doing a lot on this front with executive orders, with even exposing the filth that is happening in the schools. But our next guest has insight into something that is hugely important and almost entirely unreported, especially by the fake media. They don't want you to know that this is going on. She's a brilliant education researcher. I've had the pleasure of sharing the stage with her a few times, most recently in Tennessee at a Moms for Liberty event where we exposed so-called social emotional learning. I'm referring, of course, to Kelly Schenkoske. She is the host of A Time to Stand podcast, an independent researcher, education advocate, works with a lot of great groups. You may have seen her on Glenn Beck's program, Tim Pool, all kinds of, she's been everywhere. And she travels around the country exposing some of this stuff. Kelly, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for joining us. I want to talk to you today about something that you've been following for a while, these so-called community schools and this approach to, I started calling them in 2015, parental replacement centers. Now, I understand that some of these websites have gone dark. You told me that before, while we were on the break. But before we even get into this, explain to the folks out there, what is a community school and why should we be concerned?
So a community school is designed to take all government social services and place them at the school site. So this means the medical clinics, all social services that exist in the community, and to create the school as a hub of the community with social services. So imagine an example of this would be to extend and amplify ultimately what I see as the welfare state, a dependency upon all government social services and applied to all students, all community members. So for some, this concept might sound appealing, but again, it's looking beyond what sounds appealing in their marketing model and really exploring what is happening here. Because a big piece of these community schools is also to add extended hours at the school, open into the evenings and even the weekends. And they're already piloting housing at the school sites. In addition to have these school-based health centers that exist on campus that provide health care, as they call it, to students without their parent or guardian present. I often refer to these community schools as a government nanny state because ultimately it is leading to an erosion of parental involvement and rights. And these school-based health centers are already working in some states to amplify gender ideology and harmful gender ideologically designed and rooted medicine.
Yeah. This stuff is so troubling, and folks, don't get the wrong idea that this is all Joe Biden or this is just a Democrat scheme. Republicans were involved in this early on as well. And Kelly, now some of this stuff has gone down. Some of these websites that the federal government had on these issues have gone dark. We don't know exactly what's going on there. And of course, Donald Trump has issued some executive orders mandating at least some of the craziness out of the schools if they want federal funding. But there are a lot of states that don't really care. In fact, there are some states, I think, that would deliberately do something just because Donald Trump said it was a bad idea. So talk to us about where this is going. I mean, do you think Democrat states, California, New York, Illinois, are they going to keep moving on this?
I see actually even Arizona still moving forward on the community school model, which is referred to as WISC. It stands for whole school, whole community, whole child. And the concept of whole child also, for audience members that may not be aware, also embraces an affirmative only model regarding gender ideology. So this is something, when you hear whole child, it ought to be alarming in that sense because of the fact that we're talking about an entire ideology that children could potentially be born in the wrong body, which we know to be false. So this concept I'm seeing move forward in amplifying even telehealth. Telehealth in the state of Arizona has just been increased with a partnership of the Arizona Department of Education and a telehealth program called Cartwheel, where these programs would be offered to students in schools through a telehealth digital platform. And in California, school-based health clinics are growing, and not just California, not just in blue states, but in red states as well. We're watching these models increase. I know there's a battle being waged in the state of Maine where people are challenging the school-based health center. And in California and even Pennsylvania, there's digital telehealth. These mental health care providers that many people, again, are not maybe aware of, many of them also embrace a gender ideologically driven, affirmative only ideology. And so when a student is engaging in these mental health services, these ideas are already incorporated into them. So it's something, especially for parents, to be aware of. This is tremendous data collection on students, and oftentimes the goal is to have the parents be uninvolved from the entire process.
Yep. Data gathering, data mining, data processing, and then using that to manipulate, to guide. It's really, really, really troubling. Kelly, you first started seeing weird stuff in your children's classroom years ago, right? And that made you alarmed enough to realize you needed to dig more, and what you found was just shocking, and you finally decided to get involved. Talk to us about your journey. I mean, what was it that you originally found that was so concerning, and what did you find as you dug deeper?
Yeah, so initially I was advocating for a longer lunch recess in the same district that I had grown up in, and I remembered fondly. My son at the time was in the school district, and so while advocating for a longer lunch recess, I learned that the school district had decided to remove about the last 10 minutes of that lunch recess for the students to sit. And then what I learned was that the students were engaging in mindfulness meditation while the principal led them to empty their mind and enter into mindfulness meditation. And he instructed the entire student body while they were seated using a Tibetan singing bowl. And all of these concepts were brand new to me. So then I learned about this phrase, social emotional learning, when I met with the principal. And he told me that students were facing more difficulties today than ever before, which for my part, and I love history, I knew that that was an opinion of his, or perhaps even a pitch for the quote unquote social emotional learning that staff were bringing to the school district. And so first I was researching what was called the tapping solution. And that was a program that was brought to the junior high school in my son's district, which my daughter ended up in the district as well as she got older. And then I was eventually researching Mind Up curriculum with the actress Goldie Hawn. I was told it was rooted in neuroscience, and many claims were made that made it sound really wonderful, but I decided to dig deeper. I did the research on the claims. I also called somebody who made Tibetan singing bowls. I called Buddhist temples. I talked to a woman who is Hindu from Nepal to get her perspective. I also went to a New Age store while my kids were in school, and I talked to the owner about how to engage in mindfulness meditation. I was even told by a staff member at the school that the exercise the school district was doing with the kids was Buddhist. And while our family doesn't have that particular belief system, this entire program was confusing to me. But I learned that social emotional learning wasn't just entering that part of the school day. Indeed, it was entering the education technology. And now it is taught as a art of teaching, where teachers are being instructed to have this social emotional learning as a pedagogy with which they teach every class and the lens by which they do everything in their instruction time with students, which again, that will make it much more challenging for parents to opt their children out of. More recently, I've done some public records requests in recent years to obtain materials, but I've also learned a great deal about California and its roots to this ideology, even not far from my hometown. And I think what parents may not be aware of is how embedded social emotional learning is into everything, multi-tiered systems of supports. It's found concepts of this in ethnic studies. There even was a training that another state did that said social emotional learning is comprehensive sex education and vice versa. And social emotional learning also finds its way into the community schools model we discussed. So it's really a concept embedded into everything and in a broader global model and global agenda. So it's something that for parents, it sounds really good when the school pitches it to you, but in reality, they are taking a child at a young age when they're impressionable and imparting their value system onto the child and their ideas that the child is supposed to accept.
Yeah. And we're just scratching the surface here, ladies and gentlemen. Kelly and I have discussed offline some of this, and it goes deep. The New Age, the occult, Alice Bailey, founder of the Lucifer Publishing Company, all comes together in this mess that is happening in our schools. Kelly, we got to get you back to go into more depth on this. We're out of time for this segment, but best place for people to follow your work, we've got atimettostand.me. That's where people can hear your podcast. How else can people follow what you're doing?
I'm also found on X or Twitter, whatever you still call it, at Kelly, KELLYSKE. And I'm also on Facebook, Kelly SKE, and on Instagram at @time_to_stand. So those are 3 great resources where I share my materials, and more will be uploaded to the website soon.
Excellent. Well, Kelly Schenkoske, thanks for all that you're doing for our children and for exposing this evil. Really appreciate it. I can't wait to talk to you again. And thanks again for what you're doing. And
thanks for having me, Alex. Thank you too.
Absolutely. God bless you. All right, folks, stay with us. We're going to be right back after this quick break with Bill Walton, former Trump presidential transition team member. also the host of the Bill Walton Show, talking about the Gaza Strip policy that has confused so many of us. Stay tuned. We're going to be right back.
In 1776, a nation was born, forged in the crucible of revolution. Brave men and women stood together fighting for freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. Introducing Patriot Mobile, the wireless carrier that stands with you. We are committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile. For free activation, use promo code Newman.
Welcome back to the Sentinel Report. Alex Newman, your host here. Thanks so much for staying with us over the break, folks. We have a very special guest today to talk about what's going on with the Department of Government Efficiency. It has been a whirlwind since Donald Trump was sworn in on January 20th. And we have somebody who has been following this in a very close way. His name is Bill Walton. He was a member of the Trump presidential transition team. He's the host of the Bill Walton Show. He does in-depth conversations with leaders, entrepreneurs, and he has done a lot of important work back in 2016, 2017. He led the agency action and landing teams for all the federal economic agencies, Treasury, IRS, Commerce, Social Security, you name it, for Donald Trump. He also served as chairman of the board and CEO of Allied Capital Corporation. He's done a lot of work in finance. Bill, it's great to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining us. What's been going on with DOGE is just unbelievable. It's happening so quickly. What do you make of it, Bill?
Well, you need to multitask if you're following DOGE. I mean, there's a big story almost every day. And you know, the thing that's interesting is I worked on the transition in 2016, 2017, and the difference between what was happening then in Trump's first term versus what's happening now is just night and day. You know, back then we were working down in Washington. Trump was up at Trump Tower. He didn't know Washington. We didn't know him very well. And then all of a sudden he comes down to get inaugurated, and then we get it sort of launched then. He doesn't have appointees in place. What we're seeing now is with this transition is that it looks like he's had this team lined up for months before he launched. And of course, the gift that keeps on giving is that Elon Musk showed up in midsummer, campaigned for him in Pennsylvania, I think helped him win Pennsylvania. And since then has been, at first he was camping out in Mar-a-Lago. Now I think he's camping out on the floor of his office building, in the executive office building, which is right across the street from the White House. Now, we're, you know, as I said, it's hard to keep up with exactly what's going on, but you know, there was a testimony before Congress by the fellow who runs LexisNexis Information Services, and he's been working with various government agencies over the years to prevent fraud and abuse and that sort of thing. And it turns out that what's happening with our federal government is we've been sending out money, billions, trillions, well, not trillions quite yet, but hundreds of billions of dollars to recipients that we don't know the identity of. And a lot of this came about, I mean, it's been going on forever, but then with the money sent out to people during the COVID lockdowns, it amped up enormously. And to make it, to borrow the DOGE term, to make things more efficient, they started engaging in self-reporting, which is what you would just sort of tell them to send it to you, and they didn't double check to make sure that you weren't getting it in 2 or 3 other places. Anyway, he estimates the extent to which the amount of fraudulent payments could be a cool $1 trillion, just doing that without even eliminating programs.
That's amazing. Now, Bill, we're hearing a lot of squealing in Washington, D.C. And not all of it only from Democrats. You got NGO leaders that have been on the take. We're hearing that it's unconstitutional, that Elon Musk is out of control. He needs to be reined in. What do you make of these arguments? Does Trump have the authority to appoint people to the executive branch who take a look at these kinds of things?
Well, they've thought this through. They had teams of lawyers before they even launched this. And one thing they've done that's very clever is that DOGE is not something they just created. What they did was they put it inside an entity called the United States Digital Service. And you remember when the government websites, none of them worked during Obamacare? They set up an agency that reported to the government called the president rather, called the United States Digital Services. And it has all the legal authorizations to go into every single agency. And remember, this was to fix an IT problem. And they've got the right to let me see what they've got here. It's the order to create this was written to block legal challenges, and also was given the DOGE authorization to go inside every single agency. Nobody expected that they would take the follow the money so literally and so effectively. And what they've done is that they've just mapped the payment systems, and they started famously mapping the payment systems at USAID, and they will be doing it in Treasury. They're blocked temporarily by a judge. The thing that we saw with USAID was that a lot of this money we thought was going out to worthy recipients around the world. Turns out a lot of it had a lot of skim attached to it. And a lot of it came back here. So there's fraud in the way that money was going out. And I think when we get to the bottom of it, it's going to be not only squealing, but people are going to be worried about going to jail. Evidently, there's scuttlebutt that there are people trying to scan hard drives, and they're looking up things on the internet. What is it that Hillary do? Oh, bleach your computer.
Yeah, I heard that they're on Google. The searches for criminal defense attorneys in the DC area right now are just through the roof. And I'm not surprised. A lot of people, I think, are rightly concerned that all this is going to eventually be aired to the public. Bill, we've only got a couple minutes left in this segment. And I know you've been primarily focused on the money side, the finance side of things, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about some of what's going on the international front. We've got Trump trying to set up peace talks right now in Saudi Arabia for the Ukraine situation. We've got what's going on in the Middle East with this interesting proposal to take over Gaza. What do you make of all of this?
Well, I think it's another terrific example of Donald Trump changing the paradigm, changing the subject. And, I can only imagine he's coming into Israel and he looks at the Gaza Strip, and as a real estate developer, he's looking at that 25 miles of pristine beach and the deep blue waters of the Mediterranean, and he's thinking, what a space that was wasted. Now, this was before the Israeli Gaza or the Hamas fight started. But by doing this, what he's done, he basically said, we're going to plow the place down and come back and have it redeveloped. And we're going to do it with redevelopment money from other countries in the Middle East and maybe some other outside money. And then they're going to relocate the Gazans to other countries in the area. And what it does is it sort of kills the two-state solution in its tracks, because we're not talking about repopulating the state, but starting with something entirely new. And we don't know what that entirely new thing would be, but it's sort of taken the conversation out of a fixed place and into something a lot more fluid and a lot more interesting as to how we can get this problem solved.
Yeah. And Bill, you have a tremendous show. It's called The Bill Walton Show. People can find it online at thebillwaltonshow.com, where you interview some of the greatest opinion molders of our day, the movers, the shakers, culture, money, politics, power, you name it. What's the best way for people to follow your work? You got the website. Are you on X or any of the social media platforms?
We're on Twitter. We're on X, rather. We're on YouTube, Rumble, all the major audio podcast platforms. We've also got the show on our Substack page, and that we've got a very robust following there. And so we're pretty easy to find. The Bill Walton Show, just type it in your browser, will take you to one of the sites. It's been a lot easier to find me since the basketball player departed the mortal coil. And so there's a little confusion about who Bill Walton is now.
Excellent. Well, Bill, we appreciate all that you're doing. Thank you very much for joining us today. I hope we can talk to you again very soon, and God bless you, sir.
Yeah, Alex, take care.
Thank you. You too. All righty, folks, stay with us. We got one more guest talking about what's going on with the farming. Folks, there has been a war on farmers. It's been going on for years now. It's not just in the United States. It's around the world. We've seen federal raids on Amish farmers over their milk. Just unbelievable things. And our next guest is going to help us try to make sense of it all. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
We're living in World War III, an all-out attack against the Christian church, the Christian faith, and families everywhere. With over 80% of professing Christian teens abandoning the faith by their early 20s, it's clear we're in a spiritual battle for our very lives, and those of every generation after us. Hosea 4:6 says, "My people perish from lack of knowledge." That's why GTI created our new You Are What You Think Biblical Worldview package combining short video teachings along with textbooks, all designed to equip you and your family to discern the good ideas from the evil. Enjoy vibrant discussions over the critical issues of the day using the Bible as your guide. Go to gtimin.com, click the blue banner at the top, and enter the coupon code Newman at the checkout to receive this powerful series for only $99. That's gtimin.com, click the banner at the top, and enter the coupon code Newman at the checkout. Or purchase it directly from libertysentinel.org.
Welcome back for our final segment here on the Sentinel Report. Thanks for staying with us, folks. And this is an issue that's been near and dear to my heart for about 10 years that I've been covering this. That is the war on farmers. Of course, it's not unique to the United States. All over the world, governments have been pursuing policies that are having the effect of destroying family farms, independent food producers, and of course, now the Chi-Coms are throwing jet fuel on the fire. Our next guest has been focused on this for a while. His name is Brian Reisinger. He is the author of Land Rich, Cash Poor, My Family's Hope and the Untold History of the Disappearing American Farmer. Grew up on a farm in Wisconsin. Tells the story of rural America. Now he's a columnist, a consultant. He's worked in journalism, public policy. He's been published everywhere, including USA Today, Newsweek, Yahoo News, Milwaukee Journal, USA Today Network, you name it. We won't hold that against him. Brian, it's great to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining. Before we get into what's happening domestically here with our own government, I want to focus a little bit on the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. They've been evicting farmers, actually clearing out whole villages in China. Now they're buying up American farmland. How concerned should we be?
Well, we should be very concerned. And thanks for having me, Alex. I appreciate it. You know, the reality is that the Chinese Communist Party is trying to get their hands on one of our most elemental forms of security, which is our food security. And they have hundreds of thousands of acres that they own through one organization or another. And this is part of a broader issue in America that we have, where the amount of farmland owned by foreign entities has gone up by double digits, 15% in just 2 years. Now, it's still a fairly small amount overall, but it is going up at an incredibly fast rate. And the Chinese are driving so much of this. And it won't surprise you at all to know that in many cases, they're buying farmland near military installations. So they're not only getting their hands on the farmland that feeds us and provides our domestic food supply, but they're doing it in places that could also be sensitive to national security for other reasons as well.
Yeah, it's terrifying. And when you look at what they do to their own citizens, it really doesn't inspire a lot of confidence about what they might have planned for us. Brian, in your book, you talk about the disappearing American farmer. This is, I think, a critical issue, right? Farmers, you hear the globalists and the climate nuts. Oh, agriculture contributes 33% to CO2. I mean, yeah, they also contribute almost 100% to our food supply. So this is a pretty significant thing. And we've been watching now steadily for years the number of farms declining, the amount of land declining, family farms literally being sold off to mega corporations or shut down. What's going on here? Why is this happening?
Yeah. Well, with the book, I tried to investigate that and answer that very question. And I looked at the hidden errors of history driving the disappearance of our family farms. And I wove that with my family's story on our farm from the Depression to today. And what I found is that over and over and over throughout our history, we have failed to see how economic crises are affecting our farms on the ground, number one. Number two, government under both parties, the establishment of the Republican Party as well as the Democrats, have made mistakes, policy mistakes that have made the disappearance worse. And number three, we have technology that's needlessly leaving family farmers behind. Technological advancement is an important part of agriculture, but it has been tilted. The scale has been tilted against small and medium-sized farms for a long time. So for all those economic, governmental, and technological reasons, we're wiping out more farms than would be happening in a natural market economy.
Yeah, and it's a terrible thing. You know, it looks just like statistics on paper, but then you look at the families that are being destroyed, that are being crushed here, farms that have been in the same family's hands for generations, going broke because of, in many cases, government policy. Brian, I want to ask you, what do you think Donald Trump could do to try to turn this around, whether through tariffs or policies or ending certain subsidies? I mean, what could he do to try to reverse this trend and try to support the American family farmer?
Yeah, well, you're so right about the seriousness of it. In fact, we've lost 45,000 farms per year on average for the past century, which is staggering. And that means 70% of our farms. And the big thing that we don't have in this country is we need new entrepreneur opportunity injected in American agriculture. Again, we've got a lot of farms that are producing a lot of traditional crops. They're trapped in old, broken markets, and in some cases, markets that have been manipulated or shaped by the government. So if we can find a way to have new entrepreneur opportunity for our farmers, that's really what we need out of all of our government policymakers, to let the farmer do their work. And here's the reality. We're at a point in our history where people care more than ever about where their food comes from. They want to have fresh, local, and regional options. They want to be able to buy specialty foods that can meet a certain need that they have. The American farmer is here and ready to grow that food. But what we need is for our country to head in the direction of increasing that demand and letting that demand really be what guides where our farms go, as opposed to, government boondoggles or other things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Now, we're watching a lot happening at the international level too, Brian, and I don't know how much you've looked at this, but like the UN and the Sustainable Development Goals and the World Economic Forum with their food transformation schemes and the Rockefeller Foundation. I mean, it seems to me, I don't farm a lot. I have a few cattle. I've got a little fruit orchard. I've got, some pieces of land here and there that we try to produce stuff on, but I'm not, a commercial farmer. But it seems to me like these policies that the UN is pushing on the world are actually devastating when it comes to food production, when it comes to independent food producers, not, the big mega corporations. What do you make of this? Is the UN, the World Economic Forum, these globalist organizations, are they actively and deliberately participating in this, or what's the deal?
Well, I've always been just astounded at the idea that people would turn their back on countries having their own domestic food supply. And so I can't say I can make sense of what they're doing, but what I can do is talk to you about the consequences of it. And you're absolutely right. The reality is that they are pushing for our country, as well as any other industrialized nation, to move toward as big and corporate of enterprises as you possibly can. In some cases, quote unquote, environmental sustainability is being put in front of things that are fresh and natural. And the reality is that they are creating pressure that is adding to the disappearance of our family farms in this country. And here's the issue. People who have been benefiting from large supply chains that supply cheap food and things like that, it used to be that was, a cheaper route to go than buying from your local farmer. It's really not like that anymore. The national and international food supply chains that we have, they really aren't that much more affordable, if at all. The price of food has, as you and all of your viewers know, has been going up far faster than the rate of inflation ever since COVID. And one of the reasons for that is we have a vulnerable supply chain. So we've lost so many farms that there are too few ways for food to get from the ground it's grown in to the people of this country. And so what happens is you have one big distribution center or something like that go down, and it disrupts the supply. We saw that during COVID. We're seeing that now during bird flu with the price of eggs. And we will continue to see price shocks unless we do something to stop, slow, and reverse the disappearance of our small family farms that can be a source of our food. Here's the reality. We're losing 45,000 farms per year at the same time that we are importing more food than ever. We have a $42.5 billion ag trade deficit, meaning we're importing that much more food than we're exporting. So why are we wiping out our domestic food supply here in America and depending more and more than ever on foreign countries? It reads like a dystopian novel.
Yeah. Is this a national security issue, Brian?
It really is. When you get to the place where a country cannot trust its food supply, you really have a problem. I think we have a food system that for many decades has been a modern miracle. And that has been a good thing that has led so many people to just simply take for granted where their food comes from because they're living busy lives, And when you pair that with policymakers making bad decisions and those folks who are, waging this war on the American farmer, you combine all that together, it means we have to do something about it. So we still have an incredible market economy in this country. We have incredible producers of food. We have incredible folks involved in the ag and food industries. But we need to do something about the disappearance of the American farmer so that we can continue to have a diverse range of businesses of all sizes providing our food. Because if we don't do that, the price of food is going to continue to go up. The health of our food is going to get even more suspect. And the security of that food is going to become a real problem. And when a country can't feed itself, it's lost its most elemental form of security. And by the time you realize that's happening, it's much too late.
Yeah. It's crazy. It really is. Brian, I got to ask you about Robert F. Kennedy. I mean, he's been sounding the alarm about all kinds of weird chemicals in the food that are banned in a lot of places. And there's no real good explanation. Why do we need red 40 in, something that people aren't even going to look at? The subsidies for high fructose corn syrup. He's expressed a lot of concerns about big agriculture, big food, the big pharma, and how they all tie into each other. What do you make of what he has been calling for? And of course, he's been now confirmed as the new Secretary of Health and Human Services. What do you think we should expect with his tenure?
Yeah, I think what it demonstrates is that, frankly, people from all areas of the political spectrum care more and more than ever about what they're putting into their bodies. As a country, we care about where our food comes from than we ever have before. I think that's a good thing. I think that's energy. I think that's something that the American farmer can harness. And what we need to remember is that many farms in this country are small businesses. It's true that there are some large farms out there that have begun to supply large amounts of our food, but the broader, highly processed food industry, that's really outside of the American farm in many, many ways. And a lot of the farms that we have left are small farms that simply can't make a full-time living anymore. And so you got people who are working 2 to 3 jobs and trying to keep their farm going. Those are the people who we need to help have growing entrepreneurial ventures again. And those are the people we need to help be able to transition from traditional farming into some of these other new types of fresh, local, specialty foods. So these are small businesses. And so we need to seize on the fact that people care more than ever about where their food comes from. They want cleaner, healthier food, and they want more options. And we have farmers who are growing traditional crops and are maybe locked into those markets. They're broken markets, but they're there and they provide some level of income. And the farmer needs to work their way off of them onto new, exciting entrepreneur opportunities that can involve feeding the American people with the kind of food they want. And so we need to have a world where those small businesses can, make that gradual transition. But we need to seize this moment when people care about where their food comes from, and we need to make sure that we get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think regular people can do, Brian? I mean, what should our viewers, what should our listeners do who are they do want to support local farmers? What are some things that they could do to try to make this all better?
Yeah, everybody can take a step toward this. And, some people have access to local farmers and regional and specialty food markets, and some people don't because they just live in an area that hasn't been developed. But the reality is that all of us can take a step. So it may be stopping by a local farmer's market, trying to get your produce there. It might be stopping at a local butcher shop. It might be asking your local grocer to carry local food options because many of them are willing to do it if they know there's demand for it. It might be joining a CSA. It might be ordering from a farmer online. Any step that you can take, just ask yourself the question, am I doing anything to create new entrepreneurial opportunity for the American farmer? And if you're taking a step toward buying at least some of your food in that way, you're really going to be contributing toward a major wellspring of demand that is going to allow farmers to be able to make the transition toward more and more of that kind of thing and move away from the kinds of markets that have been failing our farmers and that have been not delivering the kind of food that the American public wants.
Excellent. Brian, what's the best way for people to get a copy of this book? The Associated Press calls it an anthem for the American farmer, an anthem to the family farm in America. That's from the AP. Where do people get a copy of this?
Yeah, absolutely. People can find Land Rich Cash Poor on Amazon or anywhere else you buy books online. It's also available in bookstores nationwide. They'll have it or they can order it for you. I appreciate anybody who picks it up and just tries to spread the word on these issues.
Yeah, folks, this is kind of an issue that's important to everybody, right? We all have different interests, different political opinions, all that, but all of us eat, all of us kind of like food. It's kind of important. And so this is an important issue for all of us, no matter who you are, no matter where you live. The book is called Land Rich, Cash Poor, My Family's Hope and the Untold History of the Disappearing American Farmer. Again, you can get it wherever good books are sold. Brian, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for writing the book and sounding the alarm about this. I hope we can talk to you again, and I hope you sell a lot of books because this is just such a critical issue. So thank you again for joining us.
Well, thanks so much. Appreciate having me on.
Absolutely. All right, folks, we are essentially out of time today here on the Sentinel Report. We really appreciate you tuning in. We do want to give a shout out to one of our sponsors on this very issue, the small family farms, right? We love the folks over at 1 Acre, Iowa. They're sponsors of the show. They produce really, really, really good beef sticks. It's a small family farm up in Iowa. They've got these great beef sticks with different flavors. They've got hot honey, grass-fed. They've got mixed mushroom and grass-fed beef. They've got original. These are really, really good. In fact, when we got them here, my kids were like fighting over them. No, when you use the promo code Newman, you're going to get 10% off on that. Get over to oneacreiowa.com. That's oneacreiowa.com. And when you use the promo code Newman, you're going to get a 10% discount on your order. You can also sign up to get a nice discount when you do a recurring subscription. Trust me, once you try these, you're going to love them. It's a healthy, delicious snack made with regenerative farming by a small family farm up in Iowa. It's called oneacreiowa.com, oneacreiowa.com, promo code Newman. And that is all we have time for today here on the Sentinel Report. I want to really thank you for tuning in, no matter where you're listening to us, if it's AM, FM, whether you're watching us on Lindell TV or Taken or Worldview Tube or Rumble or YouTube or any of the many platforms that carry us. We really appreciate you. We really hope that you will share this information with others. We don't want to just make you mad by bringing you facts. We want to get you involved. We want to help you make good decisions for yourself, for your family, for your country by having access to reliable, truthful information. So share this out. You can always find us at our website, libertysentinel.org, libertysentinel.org. You can get all the shows and our free newsletter that goes out twice every week. Thanks again for watching. Till next week, I'm Alex Newman. This is the Sentinel Report. God bless you all.